Morning, second graders. Today I'm going to be doing the Matilda Read Aloud Chapter 11, the second part of it. If you remember, the last time we read together, we were in the auditorium of Truncham Hall, and Bruce Trotter, I think that's how you say his name, was accused of eating the Trunchbull's chocolate cake. And so as a punishment, cook made him a huge cake, and they were all in the hall, and the Trunchbull said that he could not go without eating the entire cake. So, and everybody in the school had to sit there and watch as he was eating the cake. So, a continuation. Suddenly, the Trunchbull exploded. "Eat!" she shouted, banging her thigh with that riding crop. "If I tell you to eat, you will eat. You wanted cake, you stole cake, and now you've got cake. What's more, you're going to eat it. You do not leave this platform or stage. And nobody leaves this hall until you have eaten the entire cake that is sitting there right in front of you. Do I make myself clear, Bogtrotter? Do you get my meaning?" The boy looked at Trunchbull. Then he looked down at the enormous cake. "Eat, eat, eat!" the Trunchbull was yelling. Very slowly, the boy cut himself another slice and began to eat it. Matilda was fascinated. "Do you think he can do it?" she whispered to Lavender. "No," Lavender whispered back. "It's impossible. He'd be sick before he's halfway through." The boy kept going, and when he had finished the second slice, he looked at Trunchbull, hesitating. "Eat!" she shouted. "Greedy little thieves who like to eat cake must have cake. Eat faster, boy, eat faster. We don't want to be here all day. And don't stop like you are doing now. Next time you stop before it's all finished, you'll go straight into the chokey. And I shall lock the door and throw the key down the well." The boy cut a third slice and started to eat it. He finished this one quicker, and the other two, when that was done, he immediately picked up the knife and cut the next slice. In some peculiar way, he seemed to be getting into his stride. Matilda watched closely. She saw no signs of distress in the boy yet. If anything, he seemed to be gathering confidence as he went along. "He's doing well," whispered Lavender. "He'll be sick soon," Matilda whispered back. "It's gonna be horrid." When Bruce Bogtrotter had eaten his way through half of the entire enormous cake, he paused just for a couple of seconds and took several deep breaths. The Trunchbull stood with hands on hips, glaring at him. "Get on with it," she shouted. "Eat it up." Suddenly, the boy let out a gigantic belch, which rolled around the assembly hall like thunder. Many of the audience began to giggle. "Silence!" the Trunchbull screamed. The boy cut himself another thick slice and started eating it fast. There were still no signs of flagging or giving up. He certainly did not look as though he was about to stop and cry out, I can't eat it anymore. I'm going to be sick." He was still in the running. And now subtle changes was coming over the 250 children watching in the audience. Early on, they had sensed impending disaster. They had prepared themselves for an unpleasant scene in which the boy, stuffed to the gills with chocolate cake, would have to surrender, beg for mercy, and they would have watched the triumphant Trunchbull forcing more and still more cake into the gasping boy's mouth. Not a bit of it. Bruce Bogtrotter was 3/4 of the way through and still going strong. One sensed that he was almost beginning to enjoy himself. He had a mountain to climb, and he was jolly well going to reach the top or die in the attempt. What is more, he had now become very conscious of his audience and how they were all slightly rooting for him. This is nothing less than a battle between him and the mighty Trunchbull. Suddenly someone shouted, "Come on, Brucey! You can make it!" The Trunchbull wheeled around and yelled, "Silence!" The audience watched intently. They were thoroughly caught up in the contest. They were longing to start cheering, but they didn't dare. "I think he's going to make it," Matilda whispered. "I think so too," Lavender whispered back. "I wouldn't have believed anyone in the world could eat a whole cake that size." "The Trunchbull doesn't believe it either," Matilda whispered. "Look at her. She's turning redder and redder. She's going to kill him if he wins." The boy was slowing down now. There was no doubt about it, but he kept pushing the stuff into his mouth with the dogged perseverance of a long-distance runner who has sighted the finish line and knows he must keep going. As the very last mouthful disappeared, the tremendous cheer rose up from the audience, and the children leaping on their chairs and yelling and clapping and shouting, "Well done, Brucey! Good for you, Brucey! You won the gold medal, Brucey!" The Trunchbull stood motionless on the stage. Her great horsey face had turned to the color of molten lava, and her eyes were glittering with fury. She glared at Bruce Broadtrotter, who was sitting on his chair like some huge overstuffed grub. Replete, comatose, unable to move or to speak. A fine sweat was beading on his forehead, but there was a grin of triumph on his face. Suddenly, the Trunchbull lunged forward and grabbed that large empty china platter on which the cake had rested. She raised it high in the air and brought it down with a mighty crash right on top of Bruce's head, and pieces flew all over the stage. The boy was now so full of cake, he was like a sack full of wet cement, and you couldn't have hurt him with the sledgehammer. He simply shook his head a few times and went on grinning. So here is a picture of the Trunchbull getting ready to hit Bruce with that big glass tray. "Go to blazes!" screamed the Trunchbull, and she marched off the stage, followed by the cook. And that is the end of Bruce Broadtrotter. So now, if you remember, we talked about this. Each time we finish a chapter, I want you to complete one of these papers. So you're going to write down what happened at the beginning of the chapter, which you're going to have to look at the other video to get that. What happened in the middle. So again, you're going to at the end of the first video, probably the beginning of this one, and then what happened at the end. All right, so we'll recap this here in a few days. We'll recap what happened in chapter 10 and now chapter 11, and I will add it to our poster that we have been working on. So we'll keep adding to that. Next time we read, the chapter is going to be called Lavender.